Um, so then it's only me left now to put something on the table here. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. Thanks a lot. We usually don't have so much audience in Zurich. We're like they're not coming. Thanks the artists and thanks Biblioteka for having us. I really enjoy it. I'm an artist and I also write. Right now I'm working on a novel, and it started already like maybe 2018. I wrote the first piece. It was right after I visited Zurich the first time, because in Switzerland the crisps are called Zweifel. This means doubt. So how do you explain that? I don't know. So they crisping doubt the whole time, and I thought, okay. So I wrote a short story and I invented this character called Robert Doubt, a fictive relative of the Zweifel Doubt family. And now I think it's going to be a novel at some point. Last year I wrote a couple of pieces from this, and I will read one of them, like the last one. Robert was sitting at the window again, looking out over the lake. Lately he had been sitting in front of the window more and more regularly. He felt like a cat who gave the impression of having seen something outside, but Robert saw nothing. Robert sat at home and could barely remember a detail of his day. What had he eaten for lunch? By now it was 7. How had he got home? Robert had been drawing lines in the office all day. The plans for the seals on the doors of an apartment complex with 130 flats on the outskirts in Zurich. Tomorrow he would draw window frames, lines that felt very empty. Robert wondered how many clicks he performed on an average day in the office and how many mouse meters this was. Luckily he wasn't a website, he thought. On websites, clicks had become a currency in the history of the internet, indicating either the traffic or the popularity of some item. And when there was a lot of traffic on a website, companies would come and place advertisements. So, the analog world of streets and squares had transferred to digital city planning. Robert took his smartphone out of his left trouser pocket, opened the browser and wrote, "Can you count the number of your own clicks?" In 0.53 seconds, about 10,300,000 results were suggested to him, of which he read only the first. To count mouse clicks automatically, he said, you can use the software Mousometer. This not only counts the mouse distance traveled, but also automatically counts all clicks made. A notification from Instagram slid in front of the search results. It pointed out that Dank Lloyd Wright had posted a new post. Robert's thumb automatically switched to the social network. After 3 stories from distant friends, he scrolled down his feed a little. Everything was boring. The pictures scrolled blindly past him, and Robert tapped the icon with a magnifying glass at the bottom left. Next to various photos, he tapped on the first video that was suggested to him. A Komodo dragon devoured a lamp with only 3 bites until only 1 leg was left hanging out of the lizard's mouth. Robert scrolled on. In one car, the filming driver tossed his passenger 3 Mentos in an opened 1.5-liter Coke bottle, causing the sugar water to spill in a brown column of foam all the way under the ceiling and onto the passenger. His fellow passengers held their bellies laughing and shouted something in a language that might have been Thai. Robert scrawled on. In front of him appeared the Queen of England, Elizabeth II, sitting in a beige velvet armchair behind a wooden side table piled high with various papers, interrupting her work to pet her stout pet dog Candy. Instagram was full of Elizabeth at the moment. The Queen had died unexpectedly last week, and now the internet was overflowing with obituaries and pictures of the monarch, who had held the English throne for over 7 decades and was also Queen of Barbados, Ceylon, Fiji, Gambia, Ghana, Guyana, Kenya, Malawi, Malta, Mauritius, Nigeria, Pakistan, Sierra Leone, the Union of South Africa, Tanganyika, Trinidad and Tobago, and Uganda. Robert continued to scroll. David Guetta was standing on a skyscraper above the roofs of New York, behind a DJ booth, and a soft beat accompanied the scene. The video was called David Guetta Ends Racism. The star DJ had a microphone in his hand and he gave a speech in memory of George Floyd. In English, he called for more unity and peace and sent a shout out to Floyd's family. Then the camera showed Guetta's fingers pushing up the volume control and the music of the video got louder again. Over a trance beat, Martin Luther King now said his famous phrase, "I have a dream." Then the sound suddenly faded into the hamster dance. Dibby-dibby-dabba-do-do, dibba-dibby-do. And Guetta raised his arms in triumph. Robert scrolled on. A young woman in red headscarf held up a selfie stick and filmed herself in a kind of watscape. As she did so, she kept pointing to the open water behind her, seemingly explaining something, perhaps in Indonesian. Over her pink checked top with Burberry print sleeves, the woman wore a life jacket. Then she moved away from the sea, continued talking into the camera, then even started running and hurried up a sandy embankment. In the background appeared 2 running young men in shorts and a tidal wave about 2 meters high that hit the embankment and a second later and washed over the elevation. The woman cheered and stood with her legs in the water for a brief moment until she was swept away by the brown-grey current and pressed into the branches of a fallen tree. One of the young men came to her rescue, and first she handed him the selfie stick and then her hand. Robert copied the title of the video into the Google Translator window. "I'm chasing time until the waves sweep me away," it said. Robert looked out of the window. It was now slowly getting dark. The video of the tidal wave repeated itself on his smartphone. Robert put the device aside and propped himself up against the cushion on his windowsill. He had copied the cushion from an elderly man in Berlin who spent the whole day leaning out of the dark flat and looking at the street. The man had professionalized himself with the cushion at the window. However, Robert thought, there was also a fallacy hiding there, because in the man's face the view and the lack of view were combined like cement with water. The cushion became the plinth of a very sad figure on the facade of the building. Robert did not want to become like this. Could one even choose how one became? He asked himself. Robert shook his head. Things weren't that bad for him after all. On paper he was doing much better than most of humanity. He lived in Switzerland, he had studied, had a steady income and still had a good 2/3 of his life ahead of him. All he really had to do was move on. He would also inherit the flat one day, and the view of the lake was so much better than the view of the grey furrows of a Berlin street gutter. Nevertheless, how should he go on? Why couldn't he just be old now? So many questions would then be answered. Maybe he would have contributed something, maybe not, but that would no longer matter. He wouldn't have to accomplish anything or prove anything to anyone, even though, strictly speaking, he wasn't doing that now. And he wouldn't have to worry about money either. That would just come. At least that was the promise, if he paid in millions of clicks by then. He would then have drawn kilometers of lines that would be turned into walls by bricklayers, and where families lived who wished to stay young forever. A notion that filled Robert's stomach with unease. Refuge into old age, Robert thought, was for those who were not or had never been up to the task of being young. If he were old, Robert thought, he would never be alone. He would sit in a cafe every day in the midst of people. Every day he would be served the usual by the waiters and waitresses, and he would also be very lucky with the climatic changes. He could bear it very well in Switzerland, while in other parts of the world it would probably be far too hot. Maybe he could even sit outside almost all year round. And he wouldn't be sitting there alone, he thought. But he would have a colorful group of other old people around him every day, all of whom had seen a lot, thought a lot, and lived a lot. They would sit in the same place every day and discuss the world all over again. Anything would be possible. Every thought could be thought, and every sentence could be said. Every doubt would be a shared pot of honey. Everyone could come when they wanted, and there would be no agenda except the sun. Finally, like all living things, like the fly at the window, they would simply be there. Their faces would be open like doors welcoming all who wanted to come in. They would have shed their opinions. They would be old, but not wise. No one would be stubborn, and convictions would only be ideas that shook hands with the ideas of the others. No one would be grouchy, no one would be sad. They would be a new old. Every day they would eat together, and the smallest hairs in their soups would grow into extraordinary stories that they would forget the next day. And the mineral resources would perhaps already be exploited. The seas would be acidic and sardines would no longer exist, but they would bath in confidence every day and feed on homemade baked goods made of flour and the joy of existence. Of course, their hands would eventually become stained and their bellies would slowly grow ulcers, but they would also face them dancing like children. They would be a society without a queen and without fear. Robert felt the cold window pane on his forehead. His breath stuck damply to the glass, and his reflection hovered hazily over the lake. Outside, it was dark by now. Thank you very much.